The letter from the Homeowners Association arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between my electric bill and a pizza coupon, and it threatened to upend everything I had worked for over the past 3 years. I stood in my driveway in suburban Phoenix, Arizona, staring at the formal notice demanding I remove my newly installed fence within 14 days or face legal action and daily fines of $500. My name is Zachary Donovan, and I had just finished building what I considered a beautiful 6-foot privacy fence around my backyard. The fence was solid cedar, professionally stained, and perfectly level. I had spent nearly $15,000 on the project, saved up over 18 months of overtime shifts at the construction company where I worked as a project manager. The fence represented more than just property boundaries to me. It represented security for my 2 dogs, privacy from increasingly nosy neighbors, and a safe space for my 12-year-old daughter Emma to hang out with her friends when she visited on weekends after the divorce. The letter was signed by Karen Patterson, president of the Sunset Vista Homeowners Association. I had met Karen exactly twice since moving into the neighborhood 3 years ago. The first time was at a mandatory HOA meeting, where she spent 45 minutes explaining the proper shade of beige acceptable for exterior paint. The second time was when she knocked on my door to inform me that my trash cans were visible from the street for 17 minutes past the designated pickup time, which apparently violated Section 12, Paragraph 4 of the HOA bylaws. I read the letter 3 times, my blood pressure rising with each word. According to Karen, my fence violated multiple HOA regulations. It was the wrong color, the wrong height, and most importantly, I had allegedly failed to submit the proper applications for approval before construction. That last part made my jaw clench, because I distinctly remembered submitting a detailed application packet 8 weeks before breaking ground. I had blueprints, materials lists, and even color samples. I had received no response, which according to the HOA bylaws I had reluctantly read, meant automatic approval after 30 days of silence. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed at the bottom of the letter. A woman answered on the 4th ring. Sunset Vista HOA, this is Brenda speaking. Hi Brenda, this is Zachary Donovan on Sagaro Street. I just received a letter about my fence and I need to speak with Karen Patterson. Mrs. Patterson is unavailable at the moment. Would you like to leave a message? This is urgent. I'm being threatened with fines starting in 2 weeks. I see your account here, Mr. Donovan. Mrs. Patterson has noted that you failed to obtain proper approval for your fence construction. The board meeting to discuss your violation is scheduled for next Thursday at 7 in the evening. You are welcome to attend and plead your case. Plead my case. The phrase made me feel like a criminal. I submitted all the required paperwork 2 months ago. I have proof. According to our records, no application was received from your address. Her tone was matter-of-fact, almost bored. Then your records are wrong. I hand-delivered the application to Karen's house myself. She answered the door and took the envelope directly from my hands. I can only tell you what the system shows, Mr. Donovan. I suggest you bring any documentation you have to the board meeting. Have a nice day. She hung up before I could respond. I stood there holding my phone, looking at my fence. It was perfect. Every post was plumb, every board evenly spaced. My contractor, a guy named Miguel who had been in the business for 20 years, had done exceptional work. The fence enhanced the property value, if anything. I went back inside and dug through my filing cabinet until I found the folder labeled HOA. Inside was a copy of my application, complete with Karen's signature at the bottom where she had acknowledged receipt. I had asked her to sign it specifically because I had heard stories about the HOA in this neighborhood. Horror stories about approved projects suddenly becoming violations, about board members playing favorites, about elderly residents being fined into foreclosure over minor infractions. The next morning, I took a personal day from work and drove to the Maricopa County Recorder's office. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. Karen's letter had mentioned that my fence potentially encroached on HOA common property, which made no sense. My property survey from when I purchased the house clearly showed my lot lines. I had used those exact measurements when planning the fence placement. The clerk at the recorder's office was a patient middle-aged man named Donald, who helped me pull up all the relevant property documents. My deed, the original subdivision plat, and the HOA's recorded common areas. We spread everything out on a table in the research room. "What exactly are you looking for?" Donald asked. "The HOA is claiming my fence might be on their property. I want to make sure I know exactly where my boundaries are." Donald pulled out a magnifying glass and studied the plat map. His finger traced lines across the faded document. Then he stopped, his eyebrows rising. "This is interesting," he said. "What?" "According to this original plat from 2005, when the subdivision was created, this strip of land here, it is marked as your property. But look at this." He pulled out a more recent document dated 2018. Someone filed an amended plat that moved the boundary line about 8 feet. That strip is now designated as HOA common area. My stomach dropped. Can they just do that? Not legally, no. Not without the consent of the affected property owners. Did you sign anything when you bought your house in 2022? Nothing about changing property lines. Just the standard purchase agreement and closing documents. Donald made copies of everything, and I paid the small fee, my mind racing. I drove home and immediately called a real estate attorney whose number I found online. Her name was Rebecca Steinberg, and her reviews mentioned experience with property disputes and HOA issues. Her receptionist squeezed me in for a consultation that afternoon. Rebecca's office was in downtown Phoenix, in a building with views of the mountains. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with silver hair pulled back in a professional bun. I laid out all my documents on her desk and explained the situation. She listened without interrupting, making occasional notes on a legal pad. "You have a solid case," she said after reviewing everything. "The amended plat is problematic. They can't just claim 8 feet of your property without your knowledge or consent. The fact that you bought the house after this amendment was filed makes it even more complicated, but you purchased based on the legal description in your deed, which references the original plat boundaries. So, what do I do? We need to get a current survey done by a licensed surveyor. Someone independent who can verify the true legal boundaries of your property. If what I am seeing in these documents is correct, your fence is entirely on your own land, and furthermore, the HOA has been maintaining common areas on property that legally belongs to you." Common areas. Like what? Rebecca pulled out the subdivision map and pointed. "This shows a small decorative garden area and a bench right at the corner of your lot. According to the HOA documents, they maintain it as a common area. But if the original plat boundaries are correct, that garden is on your private property." This was getting bigger than a simple fence dispute. "How much will this cost?" "The survey will run you about $800 to $1,200. My retainer for this type of case starts at $5,000, but given the circumstances, I think we can win and potentially recover your costs from the HOA. They have insurance for exactly these situations." I thought about my savings account, already depleted from the fence. But I thought about Emma, about the principle of the thing, about Karen Patterson's smug face when she had taken my application and apparently thrown it away. "Let's do it," I said. Rebecca made a call and had a surveyor named Tom scheduled to come to my property the next morning. I left her office feeling both anxious and vindicated. Something was definitely wrong here, and I was going to prove it. That evening, I was grilling chicken in my backyard, the dogs running around inside the fence, when I heard someone calling my name from the front yard. I walked around and found Karen Patterson standing on my driveway, her arms crossed, her face pinched with disapproval. Karen was exactly what you would imagine for an HOA president in an Arizona suburb. Late 40s, spray tan, highlighted blonde hair and a helmet-like style yoga pants despite clearly never doing yoga, and enormous designer sunglasses perched on her head. She drove a white Mercedes SUV that was currently parked blocking my driveway. "Mr. Donovan, we need to talk about your fence situation." "I have nothing to say to you outside of the board meeting, Karen. You lost my application, and now you are trying to fine me for following the rules." "I never received any application from you. I would remember." I went inside and came back with my copy, the one with her signature on it. I held it up. "This is your signature, isn't it? From September 14th, around 6:30 in the evening. You were wearing a purple tracksuit and your husband was watching football in the background." "I can remember because he shouted something about a touchdown right as you were signing." Her face flushed red. "That signature could be forged. It's dated and witnessed. I also took a photo of you holding it." I pulled out my phone and showed her the picture. I had snapped it casually, just as insurance, and she had smiled for the camera without thinking. Karen's expression shifted from denial to anger. "It doesn't matter. Your fence is still in violation. It's too tall, it is the wrong color, and it encroaches on HOA property." "According to what survey?" "According to our records. I have a surveyor coming tomorrow morning to verify the exact boundaries. If my fence is on my property, and I followed the application process correctly, you have no grounds for any violation. The board will decide that, not you. And not some surveyor you hired." She turned and walked back to her SUV, calling over her shoulder, "See you Thursday evening, Mr. Donovan. I suggest you bring a contractor's estimate for fence removal." I did not respond. I just watched her drive away, tires squealing slightly as she accelerated too hard. The surveyor, Tom, arrived at 8 the next morning with 2 assistants and an impressive array of equipment. Tom was in his 60s, weathered and professional, wearing a high-visibility vest and carrying a clipboard thick with documentation. "Rebecca sent over all the property records," he said, shaking my hand. "This is an interesting case. I have been doing surveys in Phoenix for 38 years, and I have seen this kind of thing before. Not often, but it happens." "What exactly happens?" "HOA boards get ambitious. They want to expand common areas, make the neighborhood look better for property values. Sometimes they just assume property, especially in corner lots or pieces that look unused. They file amended plats without properly notifying owners or getting the required signatures. Usually no one notices until there's a dispute." Tom and his team spent 4 hours measuring, using GPS equipment, studying old markers and cross-referencing documents. I watched from my porch, drinking coffee, feeling my anxiety build with each passing minute. Finally, Tom came up to me, wiping sweat from his forehead. Phoenix in October was still hot, pushing 90 degrees. "Well, I have good news and complicated news," he said. "Start with the good news. Your fence is entirely on your property, not even close to any boundary line. You have about 3 feet of clearance on the south side and 5 feet on the west side." Relief flooded through me. "That's great. What's the complicated news? Tom unrolled a large drawing on my patio table, weighing down the corners with rocks. He pointed to various markings. The complicated news is that according to the original platted boundaries, which are the legal boundaries, the HOA has built several improvements on your property without your permission. This decorative garden area with the stone border and bench, that's about 60 square feet of your land. This section of sidewalk here, another 40 square feet. And this is the big one, this irrigation control box and timer system they installed 3 years ago. That's sitting on approximately 30 square feet of your property. I stared at the map. How much total? About 130 square feet of your property is currently being used by the HOA as common area. They maintain it, they improved it, but it's legally yours. What does that mean for me? It means you have significant leverage. They are demanding you remove a fence that's correctly placed on your own property, while they are trespassing on your land with permanent improvements. Rebecca is going to have a field day with this. Tom provided me with a full written report, certified and stamped, along with detailed maps and photographs. I paid him on the spot, $1,300 that made my credit card groan, but it was worth every penny. I immediately drove to Rebecca's office and presented her with the survey. She read through it carefully, a smile gradually spreading across her face. "This is perfect," she said. "This is actually perfect. They have no leg to stand on. Not only is your fence completely legal, but they have been encroaching on your property for years. We can demand they remove their improvements, or we can negotiate an easement at a price. Either way, those fence removal threats are dead in the water. What happens at the board meeting Thursday? You go, you present this evidence, and you watch them squirm. I would come with you, but honestly, you don't need me there yet. Save my hourly rate for if this goes to court, which I don't think it will once they see this survey. HOA boards talk tough until they realize they're wrong and their insurance premiums are at stake." Thursday evening arrived with typical Phoenix sunset brilliance, the sky painted orange and purple. The HOA board meeting was held in the community clubhouse, a modest building near the neighborhood entrance with a pool table, some folding tables, and a small kitchen. I arrived at 6:55, carrying a folder with copies of everything. My original application with Karen's signature, the survey report, the property records from the county, and Rebecca's business card. About 20 other homeowners were scattered in folding chairs facing a long table where the 5 board members sat. Karen was in the center, naturally, flanked by 4 others I recognized from around the neighborhood. To her right was Martin Chen, the vice president, a retired accountant who always wore polo shirts. To her left was Dorothy Sullivan, the treasurer, an elderly woman who had lived in the neighborhood since it was built. The other 2 board members were Frank Morrison, a dentist, and Valerie Hughes, a real estate agent. Karen called the meeting to order at 7 sharp, going through various routine business items. Speed bumps needed repair. Pool heater was being replaced. Landscaping bids were being reviewed. Finally, after 20 minutes of tedious details, she reached my item on the agenda. "Item 7, Karen announced, her voice taking on a formal tone. "Violation notice for 4782 Seguero Street, property owner Zachary Donovan, regarding unpermitted fence construction." "Mr. Donovan, would you like to address the board?" I stood and walked to the front, feeling 20 pairs of eyes on my back. "Yes, I would, thank you." I placed my folder on the table and pulled out the first document. "This is my fence application, submitted September 14th of this year, properly filled out according to HOA bylaws. You will notice the signature at the bottom, acknowledging receipt. That's your signature, Karen." I handed copies to each board member. Karen's face remained neutral, but I saw her jaw tighten. "I have no memory of receiving this application," she said. "I also have a photo of you holding it, time-stamped and geotagged." I showed my phone to the board. Martin leaned forward to look, his eyebrows rising. "Karen, that's definitely you," Martin said quietly. "Even if I did receive an application, which I am not conceding, the fence is still in violation of height and color restrictions, and it encroaches on common property," Karen said, her voice rising slightly. "Let's address those claims one by one." I pulled out the next set of documents. According to the bylaws, fences up to 6 feet are permitted in rear yards. My fence is exactly 6 feet, as measured by the licensed contractor who built it. As for color, the bylaws specify natural wood tones are acceptable. Cedar is a natural wood tone. I distributed photos of my fence along with the relevant bylaw sections, highlighted. "And as for encroachment," I continued, pulling out the survey report, "I had a licensed surveyor verify my property boundaries. My fence is entirely on my own property, with several feet of clearance on all sides." I handed each board member a copy of Tom's report. The room was silent except for the rustling of papers. Dorothy was reading carefully, her finger tracing the property lines on the map. Martin was studying the surveyor's credentials and stamp. Frank looked confused, and Valerie was whispering something to him. Karen's face had gone from neutral to pale. "This survey is based on outdated information. The subdivision plat was amended in 2018. "I am aware of that amendment," I said calmly. "I am also aware that it was filed without the consent or notification of the affected property owners, which makes it legally invalid. The original plat boundaries are the legal boundaries, as confirmed by the county recorder's office." I distributed copies of the county documents. "Furthermore," I continued, "according to the legal boundaries, the HOA has actually built several improvements on my property without my permission. The decorative garden on the corner, the irrigation control system, and a section of sidewalk are all on my private property. Approximately 130 square feet of improvements that I never consented to." The room was completely silent now. Even the other homeowners who had been chatting quietly were paying attention. Martin was looking at Karen with an expression of concern. Dorothy had her hand over her mouth. "These are serious allegations," Martin said finally. "Karen, did you know about this boundary issue?" "Of course not," Karen snapped. "This is the first I am hearing about any discrepancy in the plat." "That seems unlikely," I said, "since you specifically mentioned potential encroachment on HOA property in your violation letter to me. How would you know to claim encroachment unless you were aware of the disputed boundaries?" Karen's face flushed red. "I was going by the current plat on file with the HOA." "The invalid plat, you mean?" Martin cleared his throat. "I think we need to table this discussion and consult with the HOA's attorney. This is beyond our scope as a board if there are legitimate property boundary disputes involved." "I agree," Dorothy said quickly. "We should not be making any decisions about violations until we have legal clarity on the property lines." Karen looked like she wanted to argue, but Frank and Valerie both nodded in agreement with Martin and Dorothy. She was outvoted and she knew it. "Fine," Karen said through gritted teeth. "We will table the violation notice pending legal review, but Mr. Donovan, this is not over." "Actually, from my perspective, it is over," I said. "My fence is legal, it is on my property, and I followed all proper procedures. I expect the violation notice to be fully withdrawn, not just tabled, and we need to discuss the HOA's encroachments on my land." "That will be part of the legal review," Martin said quickly, shooting a warning glance at Karen. Mr. Donovan, thank you for presenting this information. We will be in touch within 2 weeks once we have consulted with our attorney. I gathered my documents and returned to my seat, feeling the adrenaline coursing through my body. Karen continued with the rest of the meeting agenda, but her voice was tight and angry. Several homeowners came up to me afterward, quietly expressing support. She tried the same thing with my daughter last year, an older man named George told me. Claimed her porch renovation needed approval after it was already built, even though my daughter had submitted all the paperwork. Karen seems to lose applications that she doesn't personally like. I drove home feeling victorious but also wary. Karen did not seem like the type to admit defeat gracefully. The next morning, Friday, I was proven right. I woke up to find a bright orange sticker on my front door declaring my fence a safety hazard and demanding immediate removal pending structural inspection. The sticker had Karen's signature and was dated that morning at 6 a.m. I took photos of the sticker and immediately called Rebecca. "She's retaliating," Rebecca said after I explained. "This is actually good for us. Document everything. Don't remove the sticker, don't touch the fence. Let her dig her hole deeper." "Can she actually demand a structural inspection?" "Only if there is legitimate reason to believe there is a safety issue. A fence built by a licensed contractor with proper permits from the city cannot be declared a safety hazard by an HOA president without evidence. This is harassment and we can use it." That afternoon, a man in a county vehicle showed up at my house. He identified himself as Luis Ramirez, a code enforcement inspector for Phoenix. "I got a call from your HOA about a potentially unsafe fence," he said apologetically. "I have to do an inspection." "It is standard procedure when there's a complaint. I understand. You are just doing your job." Lewis spent 15 minutes examining the fence, checking posts, measuring heights, testing stability. Finally, he came back to where I was waiting. "This fence is perfect," he said. "Whoever built this knew what they were doing. Concrete footings are deep, posts are solid, everything is level and secure. There is absolutely no safety issue here. I will file a report saying the complaint was unfounded." "The HOA president is harassing me over a property dispute," I said. "She called in a false complaint." Lewis's expression darkened. "That's not okay. False complaints waste city resources. I am going to note in my report that there was no good faith basis for this inspection. If she calls again with another baseless complaint, there could be consequences for her." After Lewis left, I called Rebecca and updated her. She was pleased. "We are building a strong case for harassment now. Keep documenting everything." The weekend passed quietly, but Monday morning brought a new development. I received a certified letter from a law firm representing the HOA. The letter was dense with legal language, but the core message was clear. The HOA was demanding I remove my fence within 30 days or face legal action for breach of CC and Articus, which are the covenants, conditions, and restrictions governing the subdivision. I forwarded the letter to Rebecca. She called me back within an hour. "They are represented by Hendricks and Shaw. I know them. They're a mid-sized firm that handles a lot of HOA work. This is actually good news." "How is being threatened with a lawsuit good news?" "Because now we respond officially, and we put all our cards on the table. They are going to advise the HOA to back down once they see the survey and the property evidence. Law firms don't like taking losing cases, especially against clear property rights. Bad for their reputation." Rebecca drafted a response letter that was a masterpiece of professional aggression. She laid out all the evidence, cited relevant Arizona property law, mentioned the invalid plat amendment, detailed the HOA's encroachments on my property, and concluded by demanding the HOA withdraw all violations and negotiate an easement or remove their improvements from my land within 45 days. She also mentioned the harassment, the false safety complaint, and the retaliation. The letter made it clear that if the HOA continued down this path, we would file a lawsuit not just to defend my property rights, but also seeking damages for harassment and legal fees. The response was sent via certified mail and email. Then we waited. 3 days later, Rebecca got a call from the attorney at Hendricks and Shaw. She put him on speaker so I could listen in. "Miss Steinberg, this is Patrick Hendricks. I represent the Sunset Vista HOA." "Yes, Mr. Hendricks." "I assume you received our response." "I did. I have reviewed the survey and the property records your client provided. I have also had my paralegal do independent research at the county recorder's office. And it appears there is a significant issue with the amended plat. The HOA board at the time, which was a different board than the current one, filed that amendment without proper notification or consent of the affected property owners. It's potentially invalid." "Potentially? Okay, it's invalid. Your client's property boundaries are as described in the original plat. His fence is on his property. The HOA's improvements are on his property." Rebecca smiled at me. "So we agree on the facts." "We do. However, my client, the HOA board, is concerned about the cost of removing the improvements and the potential disruption to the common areas. They are hoping we can negotiate an easement agreement." My client is willing to discuss an easement, but given the harassment he has been subjected to, including false safety complaints and retaliation, he expects significant compensation. There was a pause. "What kind of compensation are we talking about?" "The HOA drops all violation notices immediately, provides a written apology, pays for all of my client's legal fees and survey costs, and compensates him for the fair market value of the easement for the land they are occupying. That's approximately 130 square feet of property in a desirable neighborhood. I estimate the easement value at around $15,000. $15,000. Hendricks sounded pained. Plus the legal fees, which are currently running about $8,000 and counting. Consider it a bargain compared to the cost of litigation and potential damages for harassment. I will discuss this with my client and get back to you." They hung up. I looked at Rebecca in amazement. "You think they will actually pay? They have insurance for exactly this." "The board members are personally protected, and the insurance company will want to settle quickly and cheaply. $23,000 is nothing compared to a protracted lawsuit. Plus, if this goes to trial and we win, which we would, we could argue for punitive damages based on the harassment. That could be 6 figures. The insurance company will see this as a cheap resolution." 2 weeks went by with no response, which made me nervous. Rebecca assured me this was normal, that the HOA board had to meet, discuss, get approval from their insurance company, and go through bureaucratic processes. Meanwhile, I noticed Karen had stopped acknowledging me in the neighborhood. She would drive past my house and stare straight ahead, refusing to wave. Other board members were more pleasant. Martin actually stopped by one evening to apologize. "I did not know about any of this property line issue," he said, standing awkwardly on my driveway. "I only joined the board last year to help with the landscaping decisions. I had no idea Karen was playing these games with applications and violations." "I appreciate you saying that, Martin. I don't have anything against the HOA in general. I just want to be left alone to enjoy my property." "Most of us feel that way. Karen is very invested in the HOA, maybe too invested. She treats it like a personal kingdom." After Martin left, I thought about that. Karen had been HOA president for 7 years according to the neighborhood newsletter. 7 years of unchecked power in this small domain, making rules, enforcing arbitrary standards, punishing people she did not like. No wonder she could not handle being challenged. Finally, 3 weeks after Rebecca's letter, Patrick Hendricks called with a settlement offer. The HOA would withdraw all violations, pay $12,000 for the easement, pay all my legal fees and survey costs, provide a written apology, and formally recognize the original plat boundaries. In exchange, I would grant a permanent easement for the existing improvements on my property and agree not to sue for damages. Rebecca negotiated them up to $13,500 for the easement, matching what I had spent on the fence. I accepted the settlement. The paperwork took another 2 weeks to finalize. The HOA's insurance company cut a check for $22,800 total, which covered the easement, Rebecca's fees, the survey, and all my other costs. After Rebecca took her portion, I was left with enough to recoup my entire fence investment plus a little extra. The written apology was signed by all 5 board members and read at the next HOA meeting, which I did not attend but heard about from George. Apparently, Karen sat stone-faced through the entire thing, while Martin read the statement acknowledging the HOA's errors and affirming my rights as a property owner. The easement was properly recorded with the county, and the original plat boundaries were officially affirmed. I had my fence, my property rights, and my vindication. I thought that was the end of it, but 2 months later I got a call from Martin. He sounded excited. "Zachary, I wanted to let you know there is going to be an election for HOA board positions. Several homeowners are running against Karen for president. After what happened with your case and some other issues that have come to light, a lot of people want to change." "What other issues?" "Well, once people started looking into things, we found out Karen has been selectively enforcing rules for years. Her friends get away with violations. People she doesn't like get harassed. Also, there was some questionable spending on landscaping contracts that her brother-in-law's company got without competitive bidding. That sounds like a conflict of interest. That's putting it mildly. There is going to be a special meeting next month. You should come." I decided to attend the special meeting, held on a surprisingly cool December evening. The clubhouse was packed with homeowners, far more than the usual attendance. The energy was different, charged with something that felt like a community finally paying attention to who had power over them. Karen called the meeting to order, but she was immediately interrupted by a homeowner named Patricia Flores, who called for a motion to remove Karen from the board for misconduct. The motion was seconded immediately by 4 different people. What followed was 2 hours of discussion, accusations, defenses, and finally a vote. By a margin of 43-8, Karen was removed as HOA president. By a second vote, she was removed from the board entirely. She left the meeting in tears, her face red with anger and humiliation. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the stress she had put me through, the money I had spent defending myself, the principle of the thing. Martin was elected as the new president. Dorothy remained as treasurer. 3 new board members were elected from volunteers in the community, people who promised transparency and fair enforcement of rules. At the end of the meeting, Martin made an announcement. "One of our first actions as a new board will be to review all recent violations and ensure they were justified. If anyone feels they were unfairly targeted, please contact us. We want this to be a neighborhood where people feel safe in their homes, not harassed by overzealous enforcement." Several people applauded. I shook hands with neighbors I had barely known, all of us bonded by the shared experience of living under an unreasonable authority and finally seeing change. As I drove home that night, past houses decorated with Christmas lights, I looked at my fence in the glow of my porch light. It stood straight and strong, exactly where it belonged on my property, protecting my space. Emma was coming to stay for the holidays, and she was excited about hanging lights on the fence and playing with the dogs in the backyard. That was what mattered. Not HOA drama, not property disputes, not Karen Patterson's ego. The holidays passed peacefully. Emma and I strung lights along the fence, and she invited friends over for a bonfire in the backyard. The dogs ran around like maniacs, and I grilled steaks while Emma's friends played music and laughed. It was exactly what I had envisioned when I built the fence, the reason I had fought so hard to keep it. In January, I received a formal letter from the new HOA board. It was brief and professional, confirming that all violations against my property were permanently withdrawn and apologizing again for the mishandling of my application. The letter also mentioned that they were implementing new procedures for tracking applications to ensure nothing like this happened again. Martin stopped by one weekend in February with a bottle of wine. "Consider it a thank you," he said. "Your case exposed a lot of problems we didn't know existed. We have had a forensic accountant review the HOA books, and we found about $40,000 in questionable expenses over the past 4 years. All those landscaping contracts to Karen's brother-in-law were massively overpriced. We are going to try to recover some of that money." Will she face any legal consequences? That's up to the insurance company and whether they want to pursue fraud charges. Personally, I just want to move forward and run this HOA the right way. But between you and me, Karen moved out of the neighborhood last month, sold her house and left. I think the humiliation was too much. Part of me was glad she was gone, but another part recognized the sadness in someone building their entire identity around control and power in a homeowners association, only to lose it all. Life settled into a pleasant routine. Work was going well. Emma was thriving in school, and the neighborhood felt friendlier with the new board. I even volunteered to help with the spring landscaping project, working alongside other homeowners to plant native desert plants around the common areas. One Saturday in March, while I was working in my backyard, my neighbor to the south, a woman named Linda, who I had only met in passing, came to the fence. "Zachary, I wanted to thank you for what you did with the HOA situation," she said. "I was going to sell my house because I was so tired of the harassment. Karen had me written up for violations almost every month. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black, my house number was an inch too small, my car was parked facing the wrong direction. It was endless. But now with the new board, I actually enjoy living here again." "I'm glad it worked out," I said. "I was just trying to protect my own property, but I am happy it helped others too." "It was more than that. You stood up to her. A lot of us were too afraid or too tired to fight. You showed us it was possible to win." After Linda left, I sat on my patio and thought about that conversation. I had not set out to be any kind of neighborhood hero. I just wanted a fence for my dogs and my daughter. But sometimes standing up for yourself has ripple effects you don't anticipate. The surveyor, Tom, called me in April with an interesting update. "Remember that property line case I worked on for you? Well, I have had 3 other calls from homeowners in your neighborhood asking me to verify their boundaries." Apparently, the old HOA board was playing fast and loose with property lines in several locations. "Are you finding more problems?" 2 of the 3 surveys I have done so far show minor encroachments by the HOA. "Nothing as significant as your case, but enough that we are documenting everything and advising the homeowners of their rights. Your case opened a can of worms, in a good way. These property rights issues need to be resolved properly. By summer, the neighborhood felt transformed. The new board had implemented online application tracking, published all financial records on a community website, and established clear appeal procedures for any violations. Enforcement was consistent and fair. Karen's friends no longer got special treatment, and her enemies were no longer targeted. My fence stood as a quiet monument to property rights and the importance of fighting for what's legally yours. Neighbors would occasionally mention it. New residents would hear the story, and it became part of the neighborhood's lore. The fence that triggered an HOA uprising. Emma came to stay for the entire summer that year, and we spent countless evenings in the backyard, barbecuing, swimming in the inflatable pool, playing with the dogs. The fence provided privacy and security, exactly as intended. One evening in late July, we were sitting on the patio watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Emma was on her phone, texting friends, and the dogs were sprawled in the grass, exhausted from playing. "Dad, this is my favorite place," Emma said suddenly, looking up from her phone. "Like, I love Mom's house too, but here, with the fence and the backyard and everything, it feels like our own little world." "That's exactly what I wanted," I said. "A space where we could just be ourselves without worrying about nosy neighbors or HOA rules or any of that. It's cool that you fought for it. Mom told me about the whole legal thing. She said you could have just given up and taken the fence down to avoid the hassle." "I thought about it," I admitted, "but sometimes the hassle is worth it. If something is important, you have to stand up for it." Emma nodded, wise beyond her 12 years. "I'm glad you did." In August, I was contacted by a local news reporter who had heard about the HOA situation through the neighborhood grapevine. She wanted to do a story about HOA abuses and property rights. I was hesitant at first, not wanting to draw more attention, but Rebecca encouraged me. "These stories need to be told," she said. "HOAs have enormous power over people's lives and property. Most homeowners don't know their rights or how to fight back. Your story could help people." I agreed to an interview. The reporter, a sharp woman named Jennifer Santos from a Phoenix news station, came to my house with a camera crew. They filmed my fence, interviewed me in my backyard, and I explained the entire situation from start to finish. The story aired in early September as part of a larger investigative piece on HOA overreach in Arizona. They interviewed several other homeowners who had similar experiences, talked to real estate attorneys about the prevalence of these issues, and examined the lack of oversight for HOA boards. My segment was about 3 minutes, showing the fence, explaining the property line dispute, and ending with me saying, "Homeowners need to know they have rights. HOAs are not all powerful. If you have documentation, if you follow the rules, you can fight back and win." The story went viral online, at least within the real estate and homeowner community. I got emails and messages from people around the country who had their own HOA horror stories. Some asked for advice, others just wanted to share their experiences. It was overwhelming, but also validating to know I was not alone in dealing with this kind of situation. Rebecca told me the story had generated several new clients for her practice, people who were finally ready to fight their HOAs after seeing that victory was possible. In October, exactly 1 year after the fence was completed, the neighborhood held its annual meeting. Martin, still serving as president, gave a report on the year's activities. He mentioned improved communication, better financial transparency, increased homeowner participation, and a significant decrease in violation complaints. "We have tried to change the culture from enforcement to community," Martin said to the assembled homeowners. "An HOA should protect property values and maintain common areas, but it should not make residents feel like they are living under constant surveillance. We want this to be a place where people are happy to come home." There was genuine applause. The meeting ended with a cookout by the pool, homeowners mingling and actually seeming to enjoy each other's company. It was a far cry from the tense, adversarial atmosphere that had existed under Karen's reign. I was flipping burgers at one of the grills when Dorothy came over. She was in her 80s, sharp as ever, wearing a sun hat and carrying a plate of cookies she had baked. "Zachary, I want you to know something," she said. "I have lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. I was on the original HOA board when it was first formed. Our intention was always to maintain standards while respecting people's rights. Somewhere along the way, with Karen and a few others, it became about control instead of community. What you did, standing up for yourself, it reminded us what this was supposed to be about. So thank you." "I appreciate that, Dorothy. I was just trying to keep my fence." "You kept more than your fence. You kept the integrity of property rights in this neighborhood. That matters." As fall turned to winter again, life continued peacefully. My fence weathered beautifully, the cedar aging to a rich silver gray. Emma came for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and we established traditions around decorating the fence with lights and hosting hot chocolate nights for her friends. Work was going well. I got a promotion to senior project manager, which came with a raise that helped rebuild my savings after the legal expenses. The dogs were healthy and happy. Emma was thriving. The neighborhood was peaceful. One evening in December, I was walking the dogs around the neighborhood when I passed by what used to be Karen's house. A young couple had moved in, and they had painted the exterior a cheerful yellow, which technically violated the old HOA color standards but which the new board had approved because it looked nice and made people smile. The husband was outside hanging Christmas lights, and he waved me over. "You're Zachary, right? The fence guy." He was maybe 30, friendly, with an easy smile. "That's me," I said, a little embarrassed by the nickname. "I just want to say, my wife and I heard about what happened before we bought this place. The realtor told us about the HOA changes and your case. It actually made us more interested in buying here because we knew the HOA was not going to be crazy anymore. So thanks for that." "Happy to help," I said. "Welcome to the neighborhood." As I walked home, the dogs pulling on their leashes, I thought about the unexpected journey a simple fence had taken me on. Property disputes, legal battles, HOA drama, neighborhood politics, even a brief moment of local news fame. All because I wanted privacy and security for my family. But beyond the specific details of my case, there was a larger principle at stake. The right to enjoy your property, the right to fair treatment under agreed-upon rules, the right to challenge authority when that authority overstepped its bounds. These were not small things. These were fundamental to the idea of homeownership and community. The American dream, as cliched as it sounded, included owning a piece of land, a place to call your own. But that ownership meant nothing if it could be arbitrarily undermined by overzealous HOA boards or questionable property grabs. Fighting for my fence was fighting for the principle that property rights matter, that documentation matters, that the rules apply to everyone equally. As I reached my house, I looked at the fence one more time in the glow of the Christmas lights Emma and I had strung along its length. It was just wood and nails and stain, but it represented so much more. Security, privacy, principle, victory. The dogs ran into the backyard and I followed them, closing the gate behind me. This was my space, legally and rightfully mine, protected by surveys and deeds and the law. No HOA board could take it away, no matter how hard they tried. Inside, I made dinner and called Emma to say goodnight. She was excited about coming for winter break in a few days. We made plans for decorating, baking cookies, and maybe building a fire pit in the backyard if the weather got cold enough. "Love you, Dad," she said before hanging up. "Love you too, sweetheart." I stood in my kitchen, looking out the window at my backyard, my fence, my property. It had been a difficult year in many ways, but ultimately victorious. Justice had prevailed. The underdog had won. The little guy stood up to the bureaucratic authority and came out ahead, and in the end, that was the story I wanted to tell. Not that HOAs were inherently evil, but that homeowners had power when they knew their rights and were willing to fight for them. Documentation mattered. Surveys mattered. Laws mattered. And sometimes, just sometimes, standing up to a bully was exactly the right thing to do. The neighborhood had been transformed, not just by removing one problematic board president, but by awakening homeowners to their rights and responsibilities. People paid attention now. They showed up to meetings. They asked questions. They held the board accountable. That was Karen's legacy, ironically. In trying to exert absolute control, she had awakened a sleeping giant of homeowner activism. In targeting me with baseless violations, she had triggered an examination of HOA practices that exposed years of problems. Her downfall had been the neighborhood's awakening. As winter settled over Phoenix, bringing cool evenings and mild days, I found peace in the routine of daily life. Walking the dogs, going to work, maintaining my house, spending time with Emma when she visited. Simple things, made possible by having a secure, private space to call home. The fence stood solid and strong, requiring no maintenance beyond occasional cleaning. The easement for the HOA's garden and irrigation system caused no problems. The new board maintained those areas respectfully, always conscious that they were guests on my property, there by my permission and legal agreement. In January, I received an unexpected letter from the Arizona chapter of a property rights advocacy group. They had seen the news story about my case and wanted to feature it in their newsletter as an example of successful defense against HOA overreach. They also invited me to speak at a conference about homeowner rights. I declined the speaking engagement, not being much for public speaking, but I agreed to let them feature my story. If it helped even one person understand their rights or gave them courage to fight an unjust violation, it was worth sharing. Rebecca called me in February with surprising news. Remember Karen Patterson? Her insurance company has filed a civil suit against her for fraud related to those landscaping contracts with her brother-in-law. Apparently, they paid out the settlement to you, and then discovered evidence of systematic fraud in HOA financial dealings. They are trying to recover their losses. Will she face criminal charges? Hard to say. The insurance company is focused on civil recovery. Whether the county attorney decides to pursue criminal fraud charges is a different question. But either way, her days of running HOAs are over. I felt a complex mix of emotions about that. Satisfaction that justice was being served, but also a recognition that Karen had brought this entirely on herself through years of unethical behavior. If she had just processed my fence application fairly, none of this would have happened. Spring brought warm weather and blooming desert plants. Emma's spring break coincided with my vacation time, and we spent a week doing day trips around Arizona. We hiked in Sedona, visited the Grand Canyon, explored old mining towns. But her favorite part was coming home each evening to our backyard, grilling out and letting the dogs run around within the safe confines of the fence. "This is really home now," she said one evening. "Like, I know I live with Mom most of the time, but this feels like home too. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," I said. "Home isn't just a building, it's a feeling. It's where you feel safe and loved." "Exactly, and this fence, as weird as it sounds, is part of that. It makes everything feel protected." Out of the mouths of 12-year-olds. She had articulated exactly what I had been feeling but couldn't quite express. The fence was not just about privacy or property lines. It was about creating a sanctuary, a protected space where family could flourish. As Emma's teenage years approached, I knew this backyard would become increasingly important, a place for her to hang out with friends away from parental hovering, a place to have hard conversations about life and growing up, a place where she could just be herself without judgment or surveillance. The fence made all of that possible, and I had fought for it, stood up to intimidation and threats and legal pressure, because deep down I knew it mattered. Not just for me, but for her. Summer arrived with its brutal Phoenix heat, temperatures pushing 115 degrees. The dogs limited their outdoor time to early morning and late evening. Emma came for another extended stay, and we spent most of our time in air-conditioned comfort, though the evenings on the patio were pleasant once the sun went down. The neighborhood continued to thrive under Martin's leadership. Property values had actually increased, despite the new board's more relaxed approach to enforcement. Turns out people were willing to pay more to live in a place where the HOA was not a nightmare. In August, I attended the annual meeting again. Martin was re-elected as president by unanimous vote. The financial report showed the HOA in excellent shape after recovering $28,000 from the fraudulent landscaping contracts. That money was being used to upgrade the community pool and repair tennis courts. During the open forum portion of the meeting, a new homeowner named Richard stood up and thanked the board for the fair treatment his family had received. "We moved from a neighborhood where the HOA was like living under a dictatorship. This is night and day different. We actually feel like this is our home, not just property we are renting from the HOA." There was applause, and Martin nodded. "That is exactly our goal. We are here to maintain standards and protect property values, but we are not here to make your lives miserable." Common sense and communication go a long way. As the meeting ended and people mingled over refreshments, I reflected on how far the neighborhood had come in less than 2 years. From fear and resentment to genuine community. From arbitrary enforcement to fair application of reasonable rules. From one person's personal fiefdom to an actual democratic process. And it had all started with a fence. My fence. The fence that should have been a simple improvement but became a catalyst for change. Walking home that evening, I passed by several houses where I now knew the owners by name. People I had met through the various HOA events and meetings that had followed the upheaval. We were not close friends necessarily, but we were neighbors in the true sense of the word. People who looked out for each other, who respected each other's property and privacy, who contributed to a sense of community. That fall, Emma started 7th grade, and her visits became more sporadic as school activities and friends took up more of her time. But when she did come, the backyard was still her favorite spot. She had claimed one corner near the fence for what she called her reading nook, where she had set up a hammock and some string lights. I would often find her there on weekend afternoons, lying in the hammock with a book or her sketch pad, the dogs sprawled nearby. She looked peaceful in those moments, truly relaxed. That image alone justified every dollar spent, every stressful meeting, every hour spent fighting the HOA. In November, I got an unexpected visit from Patrick Hendricks, the attorney who had represented the HOA during our dispute. He showed up at my door on a Saturday morning, wearing casual clothes rather than his usual suit. "I hope this is not weird," he said. "I just wanted to say thank you for not pursuing damages beyond the settlement. You could have made this much more expensive and complicated for everyone." "I was not trying to punish the whole neighborhood for one person's actions," I said. "I just wanted what was fair." "Well, I have been practicing HOA law for 15 years, and I can tell you that level of reasonableness is rare. Most property disputes turn into scorched earth warfare. You and your attorney handled it professionally, got what you deserved, and allowed everyone to move forward. The neighborhood is better for it." After he left, I thought about his words. There was a temptation when you have been wronged to seek maximum revenge, to punish as harshly as possible. But what would that have accomplished? A larger settlement that would have come from neighborhood dues, punishing innocent homeowners. Prolonged litigation that would have kept everyone miserable for years. Instead, we had reached a fair resolution that corrected the property issues, compensated me for my trouble, and allowed the neighborhood to heal and improve. That seemed like the better outcome for everyone involved. As the 2-year anniversary of the fence installation approached, I decided to host a backyard party. I invited neighbors, Emma's friends, colleagues from work, and even Rebecca, who had become something of a friend beyond just being my attorney. It was a perfect October evening, cool enough to be comfortable, with clear skies full of stars. I grilled burgers and chicken, people brought side dishes and desserts, and Emma's friends took over the music playlist. The dogs ran around begging for scraps, and laughter filled the air. Martin and Dorothy came, bringing their own stories of HOA transformation. George stopped by with his daughter, the one who had been harassed about her porch renovation. Tom, the surveyor, even made an appearance, joking that this was the first fence warming party he had ever attended. Rebecca made a toast at one point, raising her beer bottle. To Zachary, who proved that standing up for your rights is not just possible but necessary, and to fences, which apparently can change entire neighborhoods. Everyone laughed and cheered. I felt embarrassed but also proud. Not proud in an arrogant way, but proud that I had done the right thing and that good had come from it. Later that evening, after most people had left and Emma was inside showing her friends something on her computer, I stood alone in the backyard, looking at the fence. 2 years old now, weathered and strong, still standing exactly where it belonged. This fence had taught me lessons I had not expected to learn. About property rights and legal processes, certainly, but also about community, about standing up for principles, about the ripple effects of courage. One person fighting back against unfairness had inspired others to do the same, and together they had transformed a neighborhood from fearful compliance to active participation. The fence was just wood, but what it represented was so much more. It represented the idea that home is sacred, that property rights matter, that individuals have power when they know their rights and are willing to defend them. It represented the transformation of a community and the downfall of a petty tyrant who had mistaken an HOA presidency for actual authority. Most importantly, it represented family. Emma's reading nook in the corner, the dogs running freely, weekend barbecues and evening conversations, privacy and security and peace. All the things I had wanted when I decided to build it, before I knew it would become something larger than itself. As I stood there in the glow of string lights, I heard Emma's laughter from inside the house, her friends joining in at some joke I had not heard. This was what mattered. This moment, this space, this home. The HOA drama, the legal battles, the neighborhood politics, they were all in the past now. What remained was this: a fence standing strong on legally verified property lines, protecting a space where life could unfold naturally and joyfully. I went inside to join Emma and her friends, the dogs following me, leaving the backyard quiet under the stars. The fence stood guard, as it would for years to come, a silent testament to the importance of fighting for what is yours, and the unexpected ways that fight can change everything around you. In the end, it was never really about the fence. It was about home, about rights, about community, about standing up when it would have been easier to back down. The fence was just the catalyst, the physical manifestation of those principles. But I would always be grateful for the fight it sparked, and for the life it protected. Emma would grow up with this backyard as part of her childhood landscape, with memories of hammock afternoons and evening barbecues, and a father who refused to be bullied into giving up what was rightfully his. That was a legacy worth leaving, worth fighting for. Not a physical structure, but the lesson behind it. Stand up for what matters. Know your rights. Don't let fear or inconvenience stop you from fighting for justice. Good documentation and good attorneys can defeat even the most entrenched authority. And sometimes, just sometimes, a simple fence can change everything.